Hi, everybody. I'm Molly Barnes. I want to thank you all for coming and thank you for inviting me. I mean, it's just really a treat to be here. This is so exciting. And two of the artists that I've seen when you walked me around, I actually have in my collection. One is Larry Cohen. Does anybody know him? They're Cohen brothers. Yeah. And somebody in the back. Yeah. And I just love seeing that work. I have a picture of looking out over Malibu from a plane, I guess, or maybe it was just in his head. But anyway, it's really a good piece. And another one was Nelson. Does anybody know him? His father is a Presbyterian minister in Pasadena. He has a show at Mendenhall in Pasadena now, and he's out there. He's just wonderful. He paints kind of lonely people. Which we've all experienced sooner or later. Anyway, I grew up in Los Angeles. First, I was born in London. My father was running Paramount Pictures in London, and then the war came. I was a little baby, and we moved to Los Angeles. My father grew up without a father and was a Rhodes Scholar from a small town in Texas, and was very smart. He went to Oxford, and he met my mother, who was from San Francisco, kind of royalty. Her uncle was the governor. He got in some trouble, so I won't tell you which one it was. No, Sonny Jim Rolfe, and his father, and also he was the mayor of San Francisco for many years. He died in office when he was the governor. So my mother was so formal that she actually, there were just four of us at the dining room table, she actually brought her purse to the table. And I don't think she thought a member of the family would steal anything, but that's, white gloves and purse. And I went to Marlboro, the school that we talked about before, and I really wanted to be an actress. I was the star of every high school and college production at Berkeley, but my mother was so against that. So I was kind of looking for something I could do that would be creative but wouldn't offend her. And I went, my parents sent me to Europe after college, after Berkeley, and on the plane, I met a man. This is propinquity. It's amazing how spirituality works to get you a husband. On the plane, there was a very attractive older man, and I started asking him about Europe, and turned out he was the head of broadcasting for CBS, for the network, and so I thought that'd be a good person to help me, and I married him, and it was a total mistake, except we had two wonderful children, and who are actually, my son is with Shea Holmes down here, and my daughter's with the Wall Street Journal, and they both live not too far from here, Encinitas. And but anyway, I met him, and we were living in New York, and I was really looking for something to do. He did not want me on radio. He did not want me involved with his career. So I really was looking, and I found the Art World in East Hampton. We bought a house in East Hampton. How many of you have been to East Hampton, Long Island? Yeah, I mean, you know how it is. At that time, it was potato fields and artists. I mean, it was just fabulous. And I started meeting all of the artists. Joan Mitchell lived next door. She was married to Barney Rossett, who owned the Grove Press. And de Kooning became my good friend for many years. And Pollock had died the year before I got there, but Lee Krasner and I used to go to garage sales together, and we're very close. And actually, I made a film about her, she was married to Pollock. And I met all of the people around that area. And then when Joan Mitchell was next door, the younger generation, every 15 years, the crowd changes as the styles change in art. And pop art came in. And so Jasper Johns and Rauschenberg were, beginning through Leo Castelli, the new movement of pop. And they would stay with Joan every weekend, and I would sneak over there, pretend I was borrowing something so I could listen to them all talk. And then Leo Castelli discovered them, and they became superstars. And then the next generation of pop artists became great favorites of mine. My first husband was transferred to LA with CBS. And the art scene there was quite different. The Ferris Gallery, any of you remember the Ferris Gallery? It was on La Cienega. Yeah, of course you would. And it was all made up of the people who became the art stars in Los Angeles. Ed Ruscha, does everybody? It's phonetically Rooshay, and he's really kind of the leader of America right now. You know, he's so hot everywhere. And there was a whole group, Billy Al Bankston. I'm trying to think of some of those other people who were there. Kenny Price. There was only one woman, but you know, at that time there was a real shortage of women. And when I opened my first gallery in 1967, I found that all of us ignored women because we had excuses. We would say, oh, they have to stay home and take care of the children, or they have bad moods once a month. I mean, I was just shocking how we were all so provincial. But when I opened my first, I worked for a lot of dealers. I worked for Frank Pearls, who was great. Recently, I was interviewing Virginia Dwan in New York, and a Q&A I'll tell you about. And I was asking her questions. She had established a gallery in Los Angeles and then took her gallery to New York and then gave her collection to the National Gallery and just had a show of her collection at LACMA. But anyway, so I asked her, I said, who was your mentor? And she said, Frank Pearls, and I just screamed. I said, he was mine too. And then I realized the kind of women that work for Frank Pearls. You know, we all were kind of somewhat affluent and also just fell for him. I mean, he was absolutely wonderful. Anyway, I worked for him. I worked for Rolf Nelson, who was Frank Gehry's brother-in-law. I worked for, do you remember him? Yeah. And a lot of different people. And then I opened my first, I was working for him, actually, and he invested all his money in Virginia, who's the woman from the Southwest, the painter? George O'Keeffe. Yeah, George O'Keeffe. And anyway, he invested all his money, this is Rolf Nelson, in George O'Keeffe's, and then nobody bought it. And so, you know, so he went out of business. And I sort of took his mailing list, which we all did in those days, you know, whoever we'd worked for. We learned how to sell art. He was very good at teaching people how to do lighting, and he had a really good cadre of artists. Judy Chicago, Lowell Nesbitt. It was just wonderful. But then when he closed, I opened my first gallery in 1967. And I showed a plethora of New York artists, second-generation abstract expressionists, pop artists, and then I started looking at the Los Angeles art scene. And I discovered John Baldessari. Do you all know him? I had worked for Feigen Palmer right before I opened my place, after Rolf closed. But Feigen is still a very top New York dealer. But one day when I was working for him, Billy Wilder, the collector, the director, was there, and a man came in with a big thing wrapped, and it looked like a gun. I think maybe it was a plastic gun, but he said to the group of us there, would you buy this for $50,000? And Billy Wilder had the perspicacity to say, could we see it before we write you a check? And I raced to the police, you know, called the police. So when John Baldessari showed up at my gallery, when I'd opened my gallery at 631 North La Cienega, he said, would you look at my artwork? And a lot of you know him. Now he wears the right shoes, so you could tell he has some money, and also a good watch. But the rest of him, he's about 6'7" and very crumpled looking. And when he walked in, I thought, oh my God, what's he gonna, does he want money, or does he want to sell me something unwrapped? Anyway, so he said, would you show me? And I said, all right, would you let me see your work? He had a big sort of, a big bag of stuff. And he started showing me the work, and it was just amazing. I couldn't quite understand of it. A lot of it was out of focus paintings of National City. And he was teaching at Cal Art, so I knew he had some sort of background, but he was really, like a joke. You know, I remember the announcement we sent out for the first show was a picture of John, 6'7", in front of a palm tree coming out of his head on a, kind of boring cityscape, and this palm tree, and then at the title was wrong. You know, never have yourself in front of a palm tree like that. And, but anyway, I did show him, and everything began to change. Oh, he had a picture of Art Forum. That was one of his paintings. That was in focus. And it said, "This is not to be looked at." That was the title. And then he had a thing about Clement Greenberg. And Clement Greenberg, the famous art critic, particularly for the Washington School, Oletsky and that group. Anyway, he had all kinds of really funny paintings. So I did show him, but everything began to change. Art Forum started sending reporters in. The LA Times began covering us. And I was just so excited to have sort of broken through, because I really wanted to make it in the art world. And it was just a wonderful time. When John left me after 3 shows, he had 3 shows with me, and then he went next door and showed with Eugenia Butler. And I was so grateful. She never got the publicity I did. By that time, I don't know what had happened, but he was looking for a New York dealer. But when he left me, he gave me a painting to thank me for how wonderful I'd been with him. And I sold it. I had it in a show of Baldessari at not the Whitney, well, anyway, at MoMA in New York. And I sold it out of that show. And I bought my apartment in New York that I still have. So that was really a good deal. Yeah, I know. It was just amazing how things like that happen. And anyway, I began showing a lot of the LA people. I'm sorry, I had a slide presentation today, but I didn't arrange it properly, so we don't, I can't show you, but I can tell you about some of the artists that I have shown. One was a man named Mark Kostabi. Did any of you ever know him? Do you remember him? KOS. Yeah, KOS, and he went to Fullerton, and he was, and he came in my gallery one day, and he asked me to show his work. And they were headless or people with no heads at board meetings. Anybody remember him now? And they were very, very good, these drawings. And he was obstreperous, and he wore a pink suit, and he had bad skin. I mean, he just did not look like an artist should. But anyway, he showed me this art, and I said, "Why don't you leave it here overnight, and let me see if I can do something with it." And I put it on the floor, and people like, just a lot of, I'm trying to think of some of those Hollywood people came in, Norman Lear, people like that, and they saw this stuff on the floor, and they all bought these pieces, like $20 or $30. They were on the floor. And Mark came back the next day. I said, "Okay, yeah, you can be in this gallery." And he thought it was so easy that he went to all the other galleries on that street before he made a decision, and nobody wanted him. And he came back to me. He said, "Okay, I'll show with you. Thank you, Mark." But then Larry Gagosian took him away, and so again, I mean, when you're an art dealer, if you get somebody that's really hot, a lot of times you lose them, unfortunately. And I've shown, many, many, many artists. And in 1989, I moved to New York, and I went to work for Mark. He was running Kostabi World across from the Javits Center. And so I was running Kostabi World, which he had other people painting his paintings. That was not, I mean, today everybody does that, but at that time it seemed like so impure. He just had a staff. He would draw and design, and then he'd have these people execute the work. So anyway, he had this huge, huge place, and so I was running it. And I came home to Los Angeles for Christmas to see my kids and everything, and I'd rented my house in LA to Larry Rivers' assistant. So anyway, it was all in the family. But when I came home, I just loved New York. But I went to the singles party in Los Angeles, and I met this man. I wanted an Italian husband. I was divorced. I thought, I'd really like an Italian husband. This man came up to me at this party, and he said, I've heard you speak, and I'm an artist. And he was Italian. He was so good looking. And so I didn't want him to get out of my grasp. I did not want to let him go, but I did not want to appear too pushy. In your book, I've learned all these tricks again. Anyway, so he and I started dating, and then he was bi-coastal too. He was a designer for Fred Heyman and for Hubagan and Revson. He was the art director for Charles Revson, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful marriage. And he died unfortunately 2 years ago. Mauro Caputo. Anybody know him? And he was just wonderful. But anyway. Mark, we were courting, and he'd come back to New York to see me, and Mark Kostabi said to me, I'm going to have to fire you today. Yeah, right, he was just a jerk. And I said, what? He said, yeah, I have somebody I think would be better suited for the job, and I'm going to Hong Kong tonight, so I'd like to take care of this today. So Maura came to pick me up for lunch, and I said, I can't have lunch with you, I've been fired. Maura said, no, you're not going to be fired. He can't get rid of you that fast. You discovered him. But anyway, so he did let me stay to, have a couple of days to get rid of my stuff. But meanwhile, he was in Hong Kong, and he looked at this. He hired somebody to take my place to stay in New York, but he hired somebody, and they were doing fakes of Kostabi, and Kostabi happened to go into a gallery and saw all the fakes of his work. So he came, when he got back to LA, he fired that man, and that man went to jail. And he actually wrote a book called Roboboy about his adventures with Mark. But I was so happy when Mark had all this trouble. He was like my son, my errant son. Anyway, we went, when I moved to New York in '89, I started working for him, and we're still friends today. I heard him recently. His family are Estonian, and when I was in New York recently, he was giving a lecture, and now he plays music at the Estonian Society. And a lot of the pop artists, the music people now, I don't know if you do that here, but they all have tap dancers with their groups. So he had a tap dancer in addition to his art on the, that was being flashed on the wall, and then this concert. It was just, but I thought, don't write him out. So if any of you are looking at art to buy, look at Mark Kostabi. You'll get a tap dancer, you'll get the whole group. And in New York, I went to work after Mark fired me for a hotel called the Roger Smith Hotel. It's on 47th and Lex. Do you know it? You're thinking, do you know it? Anyway, 47th and Lex. And the owner of the hotel is a sculptor from Yale named James Knowles. And he inherited the hotel from his father-in-law. And he was really trying to upgrade the hotel. And so he came up with the concept of making an art hotel. And so I went to work for him. I saw an ad in the New York Times. And I thought this would be a great place to work. And in the ad, it said, spiritualists with college education wanted to run art gallery. And that sounded fine for me. And so on a badly typed resume, I put a sculptor from New Paltz, where the manager of the hotel lived, Hans van de Bovenkamp. He does a lot of public sculpture. And if you ever go to East Hampton, all along Highway 27 is his work. But anyway, I sent this resume, and the owner interviewed me, and then called Hans, who I had put on my resume, and said, who is this woman? He said, hire her. She's fun. She knows everyone. And I've been there for 27 years, actually. I fly in every 6 weeks, and I do art lectures. I thought it would be, it's called an art hotel. There's a rate for artists. And Vogue magazine had it in their last issue. They were talking about, what's her name, Daniels? Smokey Daniels? Stormy Daniels. And then they put down, she lives now at the hotel. And they put the hotel down. They said it was, that the carpets weren't very good and that it was dark. And I was sad about that, but I thought, well, at least we're in Vogue, But anyway, this is just, anyway, the whole thing at the Roger Smith has been wonderful. I started with Clement Greenberg. He was my first speaker. And I've had over 450 speakers. And next Thursday, I have Helen Harrison, who runs the Pollock Krasner House in East Hampton. And she's just written a book about, do you all remember when Pollock died in the car? He was coming home from Osorio's party, and the woman in the back seat died. And then his girlfriend, Pollock's girlfriend, Ruth Kligman, lived, but Pollock died too. She's rewritten this story as if, I mean, this is so weird, as if Pollock killed the woman in the back before the fatal crash. And evidently now you can write books and use the names of these people. If you say at the end, this is fiction. And so anyway, I'm having her talk about her life as representing Pollock for 24. She's been at that museum for 24 years, but also about this new book of hers, because I think it's so fascinating that people can kind of make up stories, and as long as they say at the end, this is fiction. Anyway, that's one of my speakers. If anybody wants to come to New York next week and hear this speaker, yeah, fly in. And I also teach at art. I run the art gallery at West LA College. My husband was teaching there, and then when he died, I sort of took over the art gallery, and I gave up the gallery I had and went there. And also I teach there a class in how to make it in the art world. And for 17 years, have been teaching a class at Otis. I think you probably all know Otis, on how to make it in the art world. And some of the fun things, it's people sort of our ages. I mean, it's not kids. It's people that want to know how to get into a gallery. And a lot of really, really good artists, but they have no idea what to do. So my job is to kind of, with these classes I teach, is teach them how to get over that. Have a look that works. Where never, ever show your slides at an opening. Try to get to and even today, I see at art openings, people trying to catch the owner of the gallery. He's trying to make a sale, and they've got those slides there in their hands, and how to talk to a dealer, how to get a tribe that represents you, that you all get to know each other. If you're showing your work to a dealer, show 15, a dealer wants 15 to 17 pieces of the same style. So don't show the dealer 3 different styles, because it makes you look like a dilettante. Show one style that you want to do at least one show about. And I teach them about how to dress. Not Georgia O'Keeffe, who was the woman that was married to the German munitions manufacturer? Louise Nevelson. That's a little extreme with those eyelashes and everything, but I mean, I get a look where people recognize you. And I think, at one point I got close to the Lichtensteins, and I met them through the Gemini people at Gemini in Los Angeles. And Roy and I became friends, and his wife, Dorothy, who now runs his estate, she wanted to take me to the garage. No, not garage sales. She and I used to go to secondhand, yeah, and she loved buying this stuff. And anyway, so then when I would go to New York, this is before I bought my place, I would stay with them, and they had a 3-story house on Washington Street, and I would sleep in Roy's studio. And so it was just so weird, because Dorothy would come up. She was so chic. I don't know if any of you know her. She's just absolutely chic as can be. She would come up and see me in my little pink outfit, and then she'd say, "That's lovely, but let me see if I have something black downstairs." She'd try to really just change my look, because she thought I was really corny. And so, how much more time do I have? 20 minutes I have? How many more minutes? 20? Okay. So the art world for me is really fun. I'm bad at a lot of things. I'm bad at sales. I don't push as much as I should at sales, but I am very good, I think, at discovering people who are talented. There's something about them. If you want to know who's the leader in the community, often I will ask one artist who I like, who are the 6 best artists next to you in this generation or this this area? And then they'll give you maybe 6 names, and then you get a plethora of different ideas of this. Well, they'll all tell you one person that's the same in everybody's idea, the leader of the community, and that's who dealers always want to go to. I've been running this gallery, as I said, at West LA College. And I've had a number of, I think, really good shows. I've had 2 Black History shows. And I think, like a lot of Black artists are the people that I'm buying right now. I was buying Hispanic artists, but the insurance was so high. And there was a lot of ego getting involved in the beginning. And so anyway, that I've been buying. I shouldn't keep buying because I don't know what's going to go on with everything that I buy and put under the bed. But anyway, the art scene in LA is wonderful. It's nothing like New York. It's still open field. In New York, you have to know somebody who's a publisher of a magazine, or you have to know PR people, and everything is going against the last generation of art. And that repeats itself every 40 years. You know, the abstract expression, the surrealists came from France, and then the abstract expressionists were the first generation of artists living here. And then, you know, went into pop and then to earthworks. And today, I think there's a real interest in digital art, a combination of painting and digital art, and also really representing minorities. And that's, and also women. I mean, that, you know, I hate to say that's like a minority, but that's, I think that's very important. I want to tell you one story about de Kooning. When I went to New York, my husband and I went to a party at Barney Rossett's. He's the man I was telling you about that was married to Joan Mitchell. He had a Quonset hut in the most expensive area in Long Island, and he had bought it from Robert Motherwell. And it was a huge Quonset hut, and like the Guggenheim, I mean, it was impossible to hang art on it. So the art just leans against the Quonset hut walls. Anyway, I went to a party there that Barney had, and I was then married. And we went, and I was trying to figure out who was the most important person in that room, or who was the one that would be the most interesting. And I saw this short man in front of the fireplace, de Kooning, and everybody was trying to get to him. Everybody was trying to talk to him. I thought that'd be the person to pay attention to. So anyway, I didn't get to him, but when he was walking out, now I'm going to cry, he said, "You're very beautiful." I thought, oh, yeah, good, thank you. And 3 years later, when I was divorced, I was back in East Hampton. I opened an art school for children, and I advertised in the East Hampton Star, and it was really, really fun. I did it to kind of get my name around and also to learn about the next generation of artists. And I met this man at a party who worked for Bill de Kooning, and so I said to him, John McMahon, what is that? Is that something? Just a glass. Okay. I thought maybe it was Bill's ghost. Yeah, right. Sorry about that. So I said to John McMahon, could you introduce me to Bill de Kooning? And he said, he was his handyman, drove him and took care of everything. And he said, well, he's very hard to meet since Pollock died in a car crash. He doesn't want to drive, so I drive him everywhere. He said, if you want to meet him, put on a nice outfit and stand in front of the post office. We go there every day at 9:30. Why is it so funny? This is serious art. So he said, if you want to meet him, stand in front of the post office in East Hampton, and we go there at 9:30, and if he sees you, maybe he'll ask you, come over to the truck. So I did. I went for 3 or 4 days in my little outfit and waited, you know, in front of the post office. And then finally on the 4th day, John McMahon got out of the truck and came around, and he said, Mr. de Kooning would like to meet you. And I said, oh, you know, like I didn't know. This hadn't been planned. And so I went over to the truck, and Bill asked me to lunch. And then John said, I have a lot of errands to do, so could you possibly drive him home? I think I could manage that, yes. So anyway, Bill and I went to lunch at a Chinese restaurant on the highway in East Hampton, and he told me a lot of stories about his life, coming here from Europe, stowing away on a ship, jumping ship, working as a sign painter, painting buildings, living in New Jersey. And he told me all about his life. And he had been married for many, many years to a woman named Elaine de Kooning, but they'd been separated for years. They never got a divorce, but she traveled around the country. She had, you know, she was a teacher. And anyway, so he asked me to come back to his house. And when we got there, we'd been gone most of the afternoon. And so there was a line of people waiting to meet him, you know. But by that time, for some reason, I was part of the group. And so I was like, oh no, you know, I was like giving orders. I was the weirdest thing how I just stepped into that family. And it was just an extraordinary experience. The thing he liked about me was that my dad had been at Paramount, so I had a lot of stories about movie stars. And he wanted to know about all the newscasters, what they were like. He and Franz Klein would watch the news every night, and they really had funny stories about the news, all the news that's fit to print, or that's all. Then they said they could go to bed. And when I would stay at his place later, I mean, we became obviously friends, and he would rent me a house in the neighborhood, or sometimes I would stay at his place, and Marisol was there. Do you remember her? She had a number of covers of Time magazine in the last couple of years. And she went to Westlake School for Girls, but she pretended she didn't speak English. She really played up her Spanish. And I remember thinking, why doesn't this woman speak English? Well, it was all an act, but she was part of our group. And when Bill had his first big show at Guildhall in East Hampton, there were 6 of us who flanked him. Elaine came back. Marisol was there. I was there. I can't remember. There were 3 others. A woman from Texas. Anyway, we went in 2 cars, and then we flanked him into into the gallery show, the opening. And he just stood, and then we sort of stood like part of a star around him, which we were. I mean, I was so happy to be a part of that group. And through that relationship, I learned a lot about how to judge art, what people are looking for. One time he said, "You probably don't know anything about my art." And he was sort of rude. I said, "No, I do." And I'd read, so I knew to say, you deal with the horizontal to break up a flat plane. And I went into my little, it sounded like something I just read in an art news. But he said, "Oh, yeah, okay, all right, fine." And he didn't want to look foolish, but it's, anyway, that was my de Kooning story because it was so much fun. And I find that one of the things that I love artists. I feel artists, either painters or actors or sculptors, that they're different than we are. They don't like, I spotted her already. They don't like committees. They don't like formal events. They love being in their studios working. That's their home, the place they love the most. That was what was so obvious about Bill de Kooning. He just loved working. That was his whole thing, and you'd have to drag him out to get him out. And I began to observe the differences between artists and why artists often need dealers. Because of where I work, and because LA is such an art capital, there are not enough galleries. A lot of people come to see me about their art, and I can always tell that they don't know that they're a part of a big group, and they just working alone, thinking that that's it. And then I sort of try to open them up to suggestions, galleries that I think would like them. One of the artists that I represent and I had pictures of today is Kent Twitchell. Do you all know him? He's a muralist. He's got enormous murals of Jim Morphesis and Lita Albuquerque on the Pasadena Freeway. He's got Ed Ruscha downtown. I think it's 15 stories high. And recently he had an Ed Ruscha piece that's in Traction Street off of Alameda downtown on top of a hotel. I was lucky enough to get to introduce him to the crowd and everything. And he's one of the people I really think is an important artist. And I've taken him to New York a couple of times. The show I have now in Los Angeles is a show of people in different zip codes in Los Angeles. The show I had before, I've started copying things. I've never done this before, but I was at the name of the gallery, I can't think, in New York a couple months ago, and I saw this wonderful show of artists painting other artists from the last century, famous artists painting famous artists. I thought, what a brilliant idea. So when I went back to LA, I got the well-known artists that I knew who were painting other artists. And almost all of them were painting Ed Ruscha, I guess because he's famous and also he's extraordinarily handsome. But it was a good show. And then following that, I have a show now of artists that live in different sections of Los Angeles. And I have 2 Hispanic muralists, Sting and Big Sleeps are their names. And we're having a panel tomorrow night at the school, and they're showing a film that one of them made of the muralists, and then people will see the show before it closes. And I think it's going to be a really exciting evening tomorrow night. But I try to do panels every time I have a show. I had one show of comic book art, people who have been influenced by comic books. Nick Ryman is one from Ojai. Walter Robinson is one from New York. People who have taken off. Now Jeffrey Deitch, who was running MoCA in Los Angeles, has come back to LA with a new gallery, just opened last week. And he's showing a lot, yeah, I can't think of the name of the street it's on, Curzon, I think, in West Hollywood. And he's showing a lot of the cartoonists. And Mark Kostabi, of course. And anyway, I've done that, and then I had a show on aging, a couple who did bronzes of each other as they got old. And then they died, but I got this, the show was good. And my next show I'm going to do is bridges, artists who have done bridges of LA. And I was lucky enough, I think, to have Frank Gehry, who's now remaking that 6th Street Bridge that was destroyed. He's been hired to do that. I had a show of Ballona Creek, which is a creek that runs all the way under Los Angeles, 51 miles. And, okay, thank you. And then I'm going to have a show of, well, I don't know. Anyway, if you ever do get a chance, come up and see this gallery. It's West LA College. It's been there for 50 years, but nobody seems to know about it. Oh, that's what I'm going to have a show of. Somebody suggested yesterday how to put new signage up and have a contest and have signage, because nobody can find this. It looks like maybe it's written in lipstick, on the side of a wall. And it's 9,000 Overland. It's in Culver City. The view is spectacular. Once you get there, you pull in, and go up the hill. And it's absolutely a beautiful school, but it has not been properly advertised. And I feel that one of my jobs is to get people to know about this place. And so that's one of the things I'm working on. I feel so lucky that I've been given this opportunity in life. Sometimes people at my age don't quite know what to do. And I went through that period, and after my husband died, I kept working, and then I overbooked, it's just so I didn't have one time to think. But now I'm trying to, go back on that a little bit, because this has just been a hard time for me. But I've had 2 shows for my husband, one at two at West LA, and then one at ArtCore downtown. Any of you been down there? ArtCore, you know her? She's got that gallery next to MoCA. Okay. Life really is good. When my husband died, I went through a grieving period, and then last night I read your book on grieving, and I realized that it's time to maybe move on and also think about keeping a career that I've been so lucky to have and becoming the old lady of this career. Because when you're old, they have difference unless you're corny, When I meet artists and they come to see me, if I'm not sure what they're like, I sometimes say to them, "Who's your favorite artist?" And a number of them always say Salvador Dali, and I say, "Don't ever say that." Because for the enlightened, it means you're corny. And for the people who don't know, it's just not, don't say it. Find an obscure artist that embarrasses them they don't know, but don't say Salvador Dali. We all know he was a talented man, a craftsman, and he was a great printmaker. He had a, what's happening here?
We want a Q&A.
Oh, I thought you said I had 10 more minutes.
Right, period. Including the Q&A.
Oh, well, let's finish now then. Okay. Do I want any word of wisdom? This is my closing on radio. It came from Larry Poons. Art is not for everyone. It never has been. It never will be. But if you love it the way I do, I want to turn you on. Thank you. Yes.
Finish about Salvador Dali, though. Finish about Salvador Dali.
Thanks.
Finish what you were going to say, that he's a great printmaker.
Well, Well, yeah, but he was just considered corny by the artists who knew him, and by all that flamboyance and dating Mia Farrow and all that stuff. I just don't think that's a good person to show up as a bastion of your favorite art.
I had a question for you because you said something very intriguing to me just before, while we were standing in this room. And you said something about, I don't know who the artist was, but you said that he made a big mistake because he didn't know that in order to be big in art, you have to give back. Remember that you have to be a giver, that if you're going to be a successful artist? You don't remember?
No. Probably to impress you, how lovely I am. I just don't know. I think artists are very selfish, which they have to be. But I also think that artists are very giving people. I've never, people say so-and-so's treated me. I've never had a problem with an artist being mean or cruel or taking back work. So I can't answer that question. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes. Let's see. First, thanks for all this stuff on de Kooning. He's one of my favorite. I mean, his work is just beautiful and playful. And, so you talked about artists being part of a movement,
A tribe or a scene. Oh, okay. They paint in the same style. All right.
So how does a school or a community of artists, where does that show up, or how do they create? Is that in bars? Is that in people's studios? Is that in, how is it? How does it happen? Where do they connect? Yeah.
Okay, Brooke's question is, where do they connect? Everybody at Cal Arts, which was an extraordinary thing that Disney did, everybody connects by the faculty. And the people have their favorite faculty members, like David, John Baldessari, and they really worship those people and also spend time becoming the favorite pet and everything. But the group kind of acts as Eric Fischel, different people. The group acts as I don't know how to say it. That's their crowd. I remember meeting Eric Fischel once, and he's a big deal now in East Hampton, and say it's such an honor, sacrosanct, it's such an honor and privilege to meet you. He said, I used to sweep your floor at the gallery. So I thought, oh God, self-centeredness, but they get jobs in galleries. A lot of artists who are forward-thinking will get a job so they can learn the business and who the important collectors are and how to organize shows. And do I have 5 more minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Oh, this is a very heavy microphone. Wow. Yeah, thank you. Your stories are amazing. I am just in awe of the excitement of the world you live in and how much you have done over a lifetime. And having said that, I don't know if my question is even relevant. But I'm wondering, around art, you have the eye of being able to discover people, apparently. What is it about art that moves you inside yourself?
Oh, that's a good question. What moves me? It's hard for me. I'm not really in touch with the very young artists right now. I've started going to the downtown galleries in LA just to get involved and see what's up. But often, I shouldn't admit this, nobody's gonna, I don't understand what it is, but I ask a lot of questions. And I find somebody who will help me, not only who are the best artists besides yourself, but also what are the ideas behind this. And then I listen. And there are a number of people who are really willing to talk. I'm trying to think of the guy that owns, he owns the art magazine, Artillery. There's a new art magazine on the desk of every gallery owner now, and it's got a new name, and I'm sorry I can't think of it. It's the name of a dealer. He's on La Cienega, and he's just merged with Art Scene. So the magazine isn't like this. It's a little bit shorter, but it's got very good reviews on people. And I wish, what, are you asking something?
Oh, I'm just looking for the microphone. Oh, here. Go ahead.
So, what was the question?
What about art touches you?
Oh, what touches me?
Why is it personal to you and not only a business, but what is it about you that is drawn to art?
Oh, well, first, I just bought a piece. Do you know Ed Moses? Do you remember him?
Oh, yeah.
His daughter-in-law, have you seen her yet at Craig Crowell? I just bought one of her pieces. It was something I could afford, and I just think she's going to be a big star. One, she's married to Andy, so she has the right pedigree. And two, she comes to all the gallery openings, which is really shows love of the art gallery and the art process. And she's really a nice person. I mean, better than nice. I sense she's really a seeker. I think art is spiritual. I think it's something that touches the soul. I'm a little bit sick of abstract expressionism unless there's some new concept to it, because I've known so many abstract painters. So right now I'm very interested in narrative, things that tell a story based on comic books, you know, the idea of telling a story in a spiffy way. You look at the back of the New Yorker and they say, name this cartoon. I could never do that. But the people that do are fantastic. Is this time for me to get up? One more. Okay. One more.
Yeah, quickly, thank you. What about Laguna Beach galleries? Are you involved in that at all, or have relationship to any of it, or is that a college? Are they in the category of Dali? Or?
There are a couple of really good galleries, and there's some wonderful galleries in San Diego and in La Jolla. And the La Jolla Museum, I think, is fabulous. I just don't know Laguna anymore. I'm so sorry. But when Brooke talked about that he's doing this thing on, who was it?
Dylan.
Bob Dylan. Somebody fixed me up with Bob Dylan once for dinner. And yeah, and they drove me, and I got there, and we had dinner, and he was not interested in me at all. They had to take me home. He did talk, but not very much. No. I would have told him Dali was my favorite artist. Just to get him to really turn. I went.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank
Ladies
you.
and gentlemen, Molly Barnes.
Thank you.